name's Ben Ward, and I'm the co-founder of Hogrocket.
Okay, first of all, can you tell us a bit about Hogrocket and your aims?
Hogrocket is a new studio that three of us have founded. We're all ex-Bazaar Creations developers. So, well, obviously you guys know what happened to Bazaar, and the whole studio was closed down. Unfortunately, 200 of us were made redundant. And the three of us got together, myself, Pete, and Steve, and thought we really need to do this right now. This is what we've sort of been pining over for the last year or so. We need to start our own studio and do our own thing for a little bit. So Hogrocket came out of that. What it actually is at the minute we're an iOS developer. So we're making an iPhone game. It's very close to being released, actually. We've been going about 7 months so far. And hopefully we're going to branch out, assuming we do things all correct and make enough money to survive. We're going to be working on iPad games, Android, perhaps Windows and Mac as well, and really sort of stretching our legs.
Okay, so why did you decide to develop for iPhone first, and what advantages does publishing a game on there have over other platforms?
iPhone was really it was a no-brainer for us at the start, simply because the costs of developing on it are very, very low. The user base is very, very big. And there are a lot of people spending money on the platform. So when you compare it to something like AAA consoles, which is the background that we've come from, when you're talking about Xbox, PlayStation, you really need millions of dollars to hire people, get a studio, make a game, do a deal with a publisher. You need an awful lot of money. And the current climate is not particularly great for startups in that area. You really need to be experienced and know what you're doing. So that was kind of off the table for us. Kind of the same thing with PC and Mac. I think that area is stitched up quite nicely by people who really, really know what they're doing. So with iPhone, we had the opportunity to take our talents and our skills that we had learned in AAA games, start up with the money in our back pocket, to be perfectly frank. We're completely self-funded. We don't have investors. We don't have a publisher. And we think we can really make a difference on this platform as well, raise the sort of quality bar of our games right to the very, very top, and compete with the best on the platform. That's where we want to be.
The Hogrocket is self-publishing their games. What are the advantages of that for a small indie developer?
Well, I think to be a self-publishing studio, you really need to understand and have a healthy respect for all aspects of publishing, really. There are lots of developers who say that they're self-publishing, but really what they do is they're self-releasing. They just put it on the App Store, and then that's pretty much it. What we consider self-publishing is working with press, obviously, as a base level, hammering out distribution arrangements, making assets completely for publishing. So, for example, we have a trailer getting made. We are releasing the soundtrack to our first game on iTunes as a ringtone. We have extra sort of additional posters and things like that made up that we're going to distribute online. We're going to work with prominent community members as well as the press and prominent industry figures to help promote the game and hopefully do some cross-promotion with some other titles as well. So that's kind of the base level. That's what you need to do to be a successful self-publisher. And that's kind of what you have to do to even play in this field, to even be recognized as doing anything. Self-releasing is not enough. You have to do this publishing. If you don't do it, then find someone who will, you know.
So what's the differences between promotion and self-publishing between your current situation and how it worked in a AAA developer?
Well, in AAA, we still had a publisher. We had people like Microsoft, EA, Sega, Sony, all those guys, and of course Activision. And they still perform the functions that we have brought in-house at Hogrocket. So that's why you see a lot of developers partnering up with people like Microsoft, because they have press relations, they have a distribution mechanism, they have a way of selling the game, basically. And we need to replicate that in the smaller industry space that we're in right now. We need to make sure that we do all the things that Activision and Microsoft do, but there's only three of us, so we need to work very, very hard to do it.
How have you found moving from working for a big developer into your own indie studio?
I've really enjoyed it, actually. It's been a completely different challenge. in so much as we have to do a bit of everything. Personally, in the last 6 months, I've handled business stuff, programming, art, web design, and everything else really, marketing, the whole range of tasks that the industry has to offer. I think I've done a little bit of everything. Whereas in AAA, it's much more focused. If you've got 200 people in a studio, you've got the guys who are programmers, you've got the guys who are artists, you've got the guys who are community managers, and it fits into a much smaller niche a lot easier when you're in AAA and you can spread the load. So that's been a blessing and a curse for us at Hogrocket because we've had to learn to do things that are out of our comfort zone. But it's also been really interesting as well, and it helps to sort of build up a healthy respect for all the disciplines that the whole industry has to offer.
And how different is selling an app to a traditional boxed game, and how much of it is impulse driven?
Well, a lot of it is impulse driven, actually. What we found, what we decided right at the start of our first development cycle on Hogrocket, was that we would make a game that really suited the platform, suited the mobile platform. So our first game, I'm not going to give you too many details about it yet. We're staying silent until it releases. But the first game is a level-based format. So there's 60 levels in the game. Each one takes between a minute and 2 minutes to complete, and you can pick up and put down the game whenever you want. It's sort of a long checklist, if you like, of mini puzzles. We actually call it an action puzzler because it's an exciting puzzle game, but it's split up into those segments. And that suits the market very, very well because when you're on the bus or you're on the toilet or whatever, you can just play those 2-minute segments and happily have fun with the game without having to dedicate a huge amount of time to it. And that's the main difference between what we were doing at AAA before, which was a big sort of time-consuming experience, whereas now it's much more bite-sized, it's much more nimble. And we've intentionally designed our games that way. So hopefully that's going to sort of hit the mark and people will appreciate that and it will resonate with people. But that's probably the main difference, I'd say.
But does the size of the games mean it's easier once it's released to add updates and tweak things if there are levels people are finding difficult, for example?
Yeah, I think it does because, well, it's the bite-sized nature of it in so much as you can finally nail exactly what the problem is. As you say, if people are having problems on level 5, you can look at your stats and say level 5 is the problem here. Whereas that's a lot harder to do at AAA because there's lots more variables. It's a lot more of a complicated beast. But the other advantage we have on mobile is that we're constantly collecting data about how people play the game and how well they're doing. So we can track if people are getting the times that we expect, if people are getting the scores that we expect, and we can adjust the game very, very quickly within a week so that that's updated and plays better. And it doesn't cost us a huge amount of money to roll that update out, which is not always the case in other areas of the industry.
And how do you see the future of mobile gaming developing?
It's quite interesting. I think that's anyone's guess at the minute. Personally, I think that it's quite fragmented at the minute. There's lots and lots of different people all making lots of different games. We're experiencing what the music industry experienced when the internet invaded it. It kind of democratized music in a way so that you didn't just have to listen to the big bands. You could listen to whatever you want. And quite often when I spend money on music, it's for supporting local bands now. I really go to local gigs and I support guys who I think are going to make it big. And I'd like to think the games is going to go the same way. I think it's going to get much, much broader and the audience is going to be much wider. And if you don't like playing the huge AAA, there's always going to be something there for you to get your teeth into. And hopefully people will want to support people like Hogrocket who are trying to do something different, who are trying to make a new style of games. And I think it would be very nice if that was the case. Whether it will happen or not is anyone's guess.
A little bit about you now. How did you get into the games industry?
Well, back in probably 15 years ago now, I started working in test, in QA, and I was testing games and working for guys like EA and Kuju at the time, and just sort of getting as much knowledge as I possibly could about how the industry works under the hood. Then I went to university and studied computer science there. But I actually found that I wasn't getting as much from the course as I wanted. In my spare time, I was playing lots of games, obviously, but I was also making my own. I was making Game Boy games and Nintendo DS games, and that was brilliant, brilliant fun. But I wasn't learning the skills that I wanted at university to do that. So, for better or worse, I actually left university after the second year and was lucky enough to be offered a job at Bizarre Creations. And I was a web developer there initially, but I quickly sort of moved around the company and became studio communications manager and then an associate designer towards the end of the time at Bizarre, and then Hogrocket. So it sort of goes to show that you don't necessarily need a degree. What you do need to do is work really, really, really hard and spend virtually every waking hour making games or thinking about games or improving games, because that's really what it takes to get in my opinion.
So what advice would you give to those looking to develop iPhone games in future, or indeed any other type of games?
For iPhone games specifically, the best advice I can give is make something very, very good. Obviously, it has to be very good because you need to stand out in the crowd. Release it early. So as soon as not as soon as it's playable, as soon as it's good enough, as soon as people want to play it, release it, because you can develop that game over time, and you'll find that having the input of your user base will make that game better. And also, don't ignore marketing and PR. It's important that people play your game. If you release something and nobody plays it, then you're not really a game developer. You're just kind of a guy who makes games. In order to be a developer, you have to have people play it, and you have to have that feedback. I think that's an important part of the process.
And is there anything else you'd like to add about Hogrocket?
Hogrocket is finishing up our first game at the minute. As I say, we're not actually announcing what it is yet. We're going to do a joint announcement and a release. So as soon as you hear about the game, you should be able to go and play it. That's our strategy. We're about a week away from launch at the minute. We're just doing the last little bits, like sorting out the trailer, sorting out our review copies to the press, that kind of thing. So in about a week's time, keep your eyes open and hopefully you'll be able to play the first Hogrocket game.
Great. Thanks for your time, Ben.
Thanks, Danny.
For more information, www.train2game.com